Using AI for the User Interface with Sam Basu.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast, deliver quality, and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm that serves companies using .NET and Azure and other Microsoft technologies. We build mission-critical software, rescue failing projects, and empower software delivery with a proven approach. I am excited to announce that my latest book is now fully released. This book is about software leadership. It's called The 5 Pillars: Leadership for Effective Custom Software. The book is for anyone who's attempting to make a custom software team highly effective. And so if you want your team to deliver world-class results, this book could be for you. Teams are also doing book studies and discussions around it, and I'm excited about that. We have a book study guide available. And if you, dear listener, would like a complimentary electronic copy of the book, then just send me an email and I'll get it to you. And for those of you who are in a lead architect or software executive role, you might want to join our monthly interactive forums. These are deeply technical sessions that I really enjoy facilitating those conversations, and you can sign up for those on clearmeasure.com. Our guest today on the show is Sam Basu. He's a technologist, author, speaker, Microsoft MVP, a gadget lover, and he's the Developer Advocacy Manager for Progress Software. With a long developer background, he now spends much of his time advocating modern development platforms and tools on Microsoft and Telerik technology stacks. His spare time calls for travel, fast cars, cricket, and culinary adventures. And you can find him on @SamIDIP on the internet on all places. Sam, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I am very good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. We've known each other for quite a while, but I'm glad we're finally able to get you on the podcast. So welcome. I like to ask the guests for listeners who have not seen you speak at one of the many, many conferences that you speak at, kind of go back and touch on the high points in your career that kind of were transformative in leading you into what you're working on today in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you and me have a few years, under our belt as we have grown in the industry. It's, constant learning. I come from a long developer background, doing a lot of .NET, just enough JavaScript to be dangerous. And then we see, the evolution of cloud and AI and everything. So it's about, being passionate about the things we build and trying to share that passion, share that knowledge, and, learn from the community. I think we are blessed with an amazing developer community that we get to see at, virtual or in-person events and interact with them and just learn as we build the latest software. We love all the things that you do, the leadership that you show in crafting solid, software and, all the things you do for the community. So we are all in this together. And at this point, I have been working at Progress Software for a long, long time. I run, some strategic awareness for a lot of the developer tooling that we have for .NET, for JavaScript, and also for some of the productivity things like reporting and testing and all the fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so not just Progress itself, but you've done so much work on user interface in general, the client part of an application versus on the back end, you got all the queues and the data and moving things around and web services. I mean, so much, but you've done so much work on the user interface and how to make that client layer of an application go. I want to ask you the latest of that, but what are your general findings as some some developers have done literally nothing but web, nothing but browser-based applications for 10 years, and now we hear mobile and WinForms and WPF. What is the general split?
Yeah, so I think as long as we understand that software is not monolithic, we have to use or we have to meet our users wherever they are at and build the types of applications that's going to broaden our reach and be open to building different types of applications. Technology stacks and platforms will come and go. It's about our adaptability in learning new things and building software with the right stack that serves the customer, that is maintainable, reaches the most audience, and so on. So in terms of the UI part of it, modern apps, if you look at our software industry, it's complicated. Even the front end is complicated. It's got so many layers to it. And our goal has always been try to make developers a little bit more successful. So like you were mentioning, we build a lot of UI for .NET across web, mobile, desktop, IoT, you name it, as well as a lot for JavaScript as well. So the goal is, as developers are more and more under pressure to build solid software and ship them faster, hopefully we are not rediscovering the wheel. A lot of the UI work takes a lot of engineering. And if it's a smaller project and you want to own it all, it's good to invest and build it all yourself. But there's a price to pay because you're signing up for a lot of maintenance and keeping your UI updated with the latest technology stacks and runtimes. So again, look around. We are not the only ones, but always look around and get some help with the UI front if you can. Because modern software is very demanding. We want it to be cross-platform as much as possible. We want to have extreme performance needs on modern web apps or modern mobile apps. Desktop is a whole other beast with very intense data needs and mouse and keyboard interactions as compared to touch. We also want accessibility. We want support for regulations and so on. So modern UI stacks are complicated. So that's where I think developers could use a little bit of help.
And speaking of that help, just a few weeks ago at the .NET Conf, you were one of the speakers there, and you gave a talk called Smart UI Powered by Artificial Intelligence. And we'll include a link in the show notes because all the sessions are on YouTube so that listeners can look at that session. But AI, there's so many chatbots and other things. We haven't seen a whole lot of user interface being impacted by artificial intelligence. So what kind of use cases are actually available today for developers to use AI when it comes to UI?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, if we back up for a second, like nowadays, are you even real if you're not doing AI? It's the hype, everyone's in it. When I look at modern AI, parts of me are super excited because it's a tectonic shift in how we are leveraging some of the AI models, how much computing we are throwing at it, how cheap it is getting. But also a part of me is like, this is nothing new because we have been doing similar things for like 50 years now. It's just the how and the smartness of the AI models that is very evolved. So if you look at any of the popular, cloud-based AI services and models, it's very generic, multi-purpose AI models that are very expensive to run, but they're actually very, very smart. So we see the implications of AI and the usage in across, almost every industry, and people getting more productive with AI. As long as there's that human intervention, I think it can actually be very, very beneficial. So, before we get to UI, I think for businesses and enterprise apps, whenever you go to a conference or you tune into something like .NET Conf or any other, big tech show, you hear a lot about AI. And sometimes it's, trying to check a box that we are also doing AI. I think that should not be the mindset. It should be something that solves a business problem, and that is where kind of the rubber meets the road. So on the enterprise stack, if there is desire to use AI, it can be in multiple ways. It doesn't need to be always this fancy chat type demos that everyone keeps talking about. It can be business intelligence behind the scenes. How you ingest huge amounts of data, how you sprinkle in some intelligence in your workflows in reporting and testing. So it can be multiple ways in which we leverage AI. However, if we are to make apps that include a little bit of AI integration, because I think that's a huge opportunity, especially for .NET developers. There's a lot of help. Same for JavaScript or Python or other stacks as well. Users almost expect a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of customization as they're using our modern apps.
Yeah.
Then the UI part comes in, because we don't want to, again, rediscover everything from scratch. There is a lot of help and a lot of variety of AI services, but again, how do we integrate those in the apps? What does the users end up, seeing as they're using their apps? And also, there's a two-pronged, way of thinking about this. One is for the user. Your UI and UX has to be top-notch if you are leveraging some AI services. But also, what does this mean for us, the developers in the house? Can we be more productive in the way we build software? So it's just a two-pronged way of thinking about UI and UX for the user, as well as productivity for the developer.
That is two very different things. One, how to make the user of the software get their job done faster, and then how to make development faster building the UI. What are the interesting stories on each?
Right. So we are trying to explore possibilities on both fronts. And just to be very honest, everybody is trying to figure out what works. This is all relatively new. It's a chicken and egg problem, essentially. We are trying to figure out what is going to be the most beneficial, but we also want customer validations as we build things. So on the UI front, this is something Microsoft started a while back, and the ecosystem has kind of jumped on and tried building useful, use cases with some very smart, UI. So where we have to leverage AI services and put them in front of our users in the apps that we build, that's where our UI can get a little smarter. So this is where, let's say you are trying to integrate a ChatGPT style chatbot in your app. So do you build everything from scratch, or you get some help in the way it's wired up to give you a two-person or multi-person chat room type experience? What if we could reduce the amount of typing that the user has to do when they are using our application? Could we leverage some AI so that as you start typing, maybe in a rich text box or maybe in a combo box, as you are doing the drop down, as we are coming up with suggestion of things you can do, we can reduce the workload on the user, make them a little bit more efficient, so better UX, and also anytime there is any type of document workflow, which is very common in the enterprise. We all deal with reporting, we deal with Word docs and PDFs and huge Excel spreadsheets. Can we sprinkle in some AI to make the user a little bit more productive? So if you are being asked to look at a huge PDF document, could we ask AI to make sense of it first? And there are implications of this. Not all of this needs to go up to the public cloud, which, again, for good reason, enterprises are a little sensitive to that, because you want to protect your IP. You want to, you're dealing with HIPAA or other, sensitive information. You want to be compliant. So a lot of it actually can be done behind the firewalls as well. But it's exploring those areas in which we can use things like an AI chatbot. We can use semantic search. We can use document processing, all of it with some AI help, and empower the user to do more with less. So, more efficient workloads for the user.
You had mentioned IoT before. Are there any workloads where they're already compatible, just running locally on not special hardware?
In terms of AI models or?
Yes, AI models and doing some of this without doing a round trip to Azure AI services or OpenAI.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big tech, the Azure AI and OpenAI, those are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But again, you're making a round trip out. Exactly, you pay for it. I mean, with some guardrails, which might be warranted. But again, we are also seeing kind of the industry trying to understand where, like, not everything maybe needs to be a large language model. So all of these latest AI models, they are very good at understanding human language, and they learn from a huge, collection of knowledge, items, and they're trying to predict. It's not a knowledge-based system; it's all a prediction. However, what if we had a smaller subset that is only deeply contextual things for my company, and it doesn't need to know everything about the world. It is just knowing things about my enterprise workflow. Can that information be fed to a smaller language model? And those are actually getting, tinier and tinier as the years go by. They have, very small models that can, just run on your phone or on a, Raspberry Pi even. So again, the footprint is less, which means less parameters. It's obviously not as smart as a, ChatGPT style, like big, large language model.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, I mean, this is where you kind of go back to what, machine learning started out, where it is deeply contextual knowledge about a very specific slice of thing that it knows about. And if that's what your enterprise could benefit from, then deploy a smaller language model that can stay within your firewalls, has all the knowledge about your workflows, and you don't need to make round trips out to the cloud.
Can I ask you about some philosophy? Because there's the products that are available now, and there's the technology that are being demoed right now. But when you think about the concept of the user interface, ultimately, nobody wants to type in first name in a first name text box. Nobody wants to type in, address number 1, address number 2, right? And so conceivably, let's say you're talking to a person at a company, yeah, they need that information. So what do you do? Sometimes, like, I went to Discount Tire Company and they started asking me, like, what's your name? I'm like, hold on. And I grabbed my driver's license, which has my address and phone number. I put it down in front of them. It's like, here you go, right? There's the information that you need. So how is user interface gonna change? It seems like the days of the user actually having to type first name and then middle initial and then that's gonna go away. Is that just a pipe dream or?
No, it should. Our UI needs to get smarter and adapt with the times. So big tech, I think, tries to think ahead. You have to push the envelope and hope that people will follow.
Mm-hmm.
Users will follow and enterprises will follow. And enterprises, have to be slow and need a stable ecosystem and technology stack to build on. But I think exactly to your point, the days of the user interacting a whole lot with the UI are getting lesser and lesser because you want that smartness. There is no reason for you to type in a whole form when all of this information can be scanned with an OCR and just auto-filled in. You should know when you pick up the phone with the customer everything about the customer because it's fed from your CRM system. So a lot of it can be automated if we have the right data, if we can manage some of the biases that come in with some of the AI models to automate some of the workflows and keep the human intervention in place so that there's a human cross-checking the content that gets thrown out to a blog or the form that gets submitted for healthcare or insurance or other needs. So keep the human intervention, but our interaction with UI is absolutely evolving. And I mean, to your point about forms, I mean, I can name so many other things where it's tedious for the user. If you are to look at a modern dropdown or a date picker or a time picker, or let's just talk about the elephant of UI, which is a grid, because modern desktop or web apps, high power data intense apps almost always use tabular data that is presented to you in a grid, and grids have come such a long way. It is so powerful, the grids that we make and everybody else makes as well. So all of the features about the grid, your sorting, your filtering, your grouping, trying to search semantically within a grid's data, all of that can be automated. Maybe you don't want to click around with your mouse or your with your finger. Maybe you just want to speak. Wouldn't it be nice if we could, speak in our natural language to say, I want this exact data from my SQL server, ordered in this particular way, filtered by this particular, mechanism, and
Mm-hmm.
it all does it. It, understands what we are trying to show or, do, and brings that data and shows it to us in a way that is exactly, what our AI model understood as we spoke to it. So it's evolving. The whole landscape of what UI is evolving, but at the same time, we have to kind of keep our feet on both sides of the boat, make sure things that are legacy are also not breaking because we are moving so fast. So serve both needs, and move forward.
Yeah, I'm thinking with now Siri from Apple was like one of the first, speech to text, text to speech, but then it just languished for a long time. And then Alexa kind of took over because so many the devices are everywhere. And so it seems to me that there's still a whole lot more opportunity given that we have speech to text and text to speech. And then there's a little bit of language processing that's already proven itself out with the chatbots, where when you think about the concept of the interface to the user from a piece of software, that the days of going through a form and typing things in and then a report layout that's already pre-predicted, that could totally go away for dynamic user interfaces where we could say, show me the data like this, and then
Exactly.
Deterministically it's gonna be pretty close to what we want. And then we like the chatbot, maybe do a little bit of refinement. No, sort it by this,
Exactly. Yeah. So again, the AI models of today are exceptionally smart in understanding natural language.
Yeah.
It is what you do with it, like what exactly was your intent, that might need some work. And that is where we look at modern AI and some of the pitfalls of it trying to hallucinate. It can actually be surprisingly human, because when asked about something that it simply just doesn't know, because the knowledge that it has doesn't permit it to answer, instead of acknowledging ignorance, it'll just happily make up stuff and try to lie confidently. So we don't want that in a business scenario. What we do want is a little bit of grounding to say, yeah, maybe what you said isn't something that I can respond with. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Or you could have an AI model say, yeah, I have I see what you're asking for, but I don't have the knowledge to go do this right now. Let me do what is called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. It is a buzzword. Again, we have been doing similar things for quite some time. It is a way to say, hold on, AI model, because before you respond, you need to go look at a trusted source that is contextual to the grid that the user is asking and the data that they're asking me to pull, and go check on that source first, and come back with some citations so I can trust the response that you're giving me. And then you get a more trustworthy AI model that at the end of the day, it spits out some UI, hopefully with the data that you ask for.
Yeah, and for those cases, we shouldn't need the large language models that we're paying for in the cloud, because we don't actually need all the information that those models have been trained with. We just need a small language model that understands English or whatever language we're using, because we're asking it to operate on our data, not a whole bunch of data that it's been trained with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the large language models in the cloud, they are massive beasts. They know so much about code, so much about general knowledge. But if you're asking about something that is specific to the context of your enterprise workflow, then you're better served with a model that is trained on the things that matter to you. And in there, you also mentioned something that is interesting. English is the language of business for a lot of people, but that in there also has a little bit of bias, because not every language is treated the same. The same way when AI models go and learn code, they're learning a lot of C# and JavaScript. They don't learn a lot of the other languages. So
Right.
there's a little bit of, performance, or the quality isn't always the same, but that's up to the industry to, feed it more data that is contextual, and it learns and, does better over time.
Yeah. Yeah. All the COBOL developers trying to use ChatGPT to get help.
Yeah, it is hard because it's all about what it can grok, where it can learn from.
I've never actually tried that with GitHub Copilot, but there's mountains of COBOL out there, but it really didn't get open sourced. So I don't know how much was actually trained versus
exactly
all the code that is on public GitHub repositories.
Right. Yeah. So actually, speaking of GitHub Copilot, that is the other side of where AI can really be beneficial. It is how we build software. It's about developers' productivity. And exactly to your point, like if you're asking, how to sort an array in C#, you're not going to beat Copilot on anything else because it knows every open source GitHub repo that's out there. It has learned. It knows exactly how to respond for something that's so generic and on a popular programming language. But if you ask it something that is very contextual, let's just say it's a Telerik grid that you're using, and you're asking about a feature that we have just introduced like a month back, or you're asking about something that has a lot of support forum discussions, which may or may not all be public. So now we get to see where, Copilot is absolutely amazing. And that's maybe to you and me, which is, for .NET developers, other developers use other coding assistants, but it amazes me how smart and how good these things have gotten. Our productivity is through the roof, like how much it can guess. Like you let it grok through your solution even, like it doesn't even need to go out. It will tell you things about your own solution and project that you might not know. It knows all your interfaces. If you let it, with a little bit of help with some documentation and commenting, it is very, very good. However, it has some limitations. One is the latency. So if we added a feature to a grid last month, it has no way of knowing because its knowledge is marked in time.
Right.
The last few months is when it last read and understood all of this data. So it's marked in time, and it's not going to know something about stuff that happened yesterday. And also, if it is not public, or if it's not a part of the knowledge that it has had the opportunity to walk through, it has no clue on how to help you because it just doesn't have that knowledge. So that is where we are very conscious of bringing value to developers. It is not trying to reinvent anything. That's where you also see things like GitHub Copilot embracing the extensibility model. So maybe you're doing something on Docker. Maybe you're doing something with the Telerik grid that needs deep contextual knowledge that only Docker or only Telerik can bring to the table. That's where you're seeing some custom chat agents who have that deep knowledge, who can go beyond what Copilot knows and bring you that exact piece of knowledge that you need to answer your question.
That's interesting. Let's say I upgrade one of my libraries. Let's say I'm using Entity Framework, and I just upgrade to the latest Entity Framework that just came out, and it's got a new method, and then I start using that new method in my code. Does GitHub Copilot somehow become aware of it because it's in my code, or is it still completely unaware that there's a new method?
Well, it depends on when it has had the chance to learn. And if you start asking it questions based on some of the models, like GitHub Copilot right now is using GPT-4, 4.0, which is the latest OpenAI model behind the scenes. And even if it has not had a chance to walk through the latest documentation on that entity framework method, the more you ask, it actually also learns a little bit. The more code you write, it learns from your implementation of that interface or that method, and it's going to start getting smarter. But like on day zero, if you ask it something that it has had no chance to learn, then it's not going to be able to help you out until you do that grounding to say, I want you to go look at this documentation. Here's a URL. Go look at that and then come back to me. Then it starts behaving better and better.
Yeah. You work with a lot of .NET developers and JavaScript developers, etc. at Progress. Has GitHub Copilot become a standard tool there, or have they been trained? What's kind of the deployment status that is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as with any enterprise, we are very optimistic about AI, but we also have to do things a little bit cautiously. And this is true for a lot of industries where, like, I talk to people who are working for government,
Mm-hmm.
contracts, people who are working in healthcare, and they look at all of the fancy coding assistants, and they're like, we can't use any of it because what we're dealing with is very, very sensitive. So there are ways to get around that. You can actually ask GitHub Copilot to work purely within your premises. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not as smart. It doesn't go out to GitHub to get every recommendation that it can. It tries to do its best based on your code base. So it's the same idea with us. Like, we have IP that we have to protect, that we don't want GitHub Copilot to learn from. Instead, we
Yeah.
want it to help with the stuff that we are building. So there are, guardrails in place from the GitHub teams where you can ask it to do things where none of the intelligence leaves your premises. So we actually have GitHub Copilot in use across all of our engineering teams, but with some guardrails on how it consumes our data and what type of recommendations it can bring down.
Are you aware of any training yet for developers on how to use GitHub Copilot besides just some the YouTube demos?
No, and maybe that is a gap. Yeah, there's a lot of content from influencers, but I don't think there is
Yeah,
anything officially. And part of it maybe it's such a fast-moving ecosystem,
yeah,
so it's evolving just nonstop.
yeah. Training is kind of always lagging. The dust has to settle for there to be something
Right?
that comes out. But
Yeah.
um, it seems like there's so many conversations happening, and then I think, okay, well, what are the scenarios that are just slam dunk that everybody should be using now, that developers should be trained on now because they're kind of proven. Maybe I need to put that
Yeah.
out there.
No, and it is a very pertinent thought because everyone's trying to struggle with the same problems of a fast-moving system, but you want that stability, which is why you also see some of the abstraction models becoming popular. So if you build an app which is talking directly to OpenAI, and what if they change their model tomorrow? What if they change their API, surface? You don't want to have, an emergency need to update your own software. You want an abstraction layer so your software doesn't break the moment the model changes or the API changes. So, which is why you're seeing, the growth of abstraction layers, and it's also not just abstraction; it's a lot of orchestration as well. Things like the semantic kernel, things like Microsoft's Extensions AI or LangChain, they are all in the same boat where they will give you the APIs and you go talk to whichever cloud or on-premises AI services that you need, but it is a level of protection that is stable and it's not changing as fast as the AI models. And hopefully your software doesn't need to break every time there's a AI model change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as we kind of get to the end of our show here, I want to include links to Progress Software and Telerik. What things should the listeners make sure to check out to see the use cases or for the products that are have AI integrated in them somehow so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a few links as well. But we have done a whole bunch of experiments at this point on what's called smart UI. So it is, UI components, but they are powered by an AI engine.
Mm-hmm.
And the front end can be a desktop app. It can be an old school WPF or a WinForms app, but you can still, sprinkle in some intelligence because it's backed by an AI service. It can be as small as a drop down list where the user has to type less. It can be as elaborate as a gigantic PDF document that's in the form of a report. We chunk it up and we feed it to an AI service, and now you can ask questions of it. Think about legal, think about industries which need to consume huge amounts of information. So there's a whole lot of help in terms of smart UI components that are all experimental at this point. Because again, we are trying to make sure we are building the right things that the customers would need.
Yeah.
Some of them also we have to think about regulatory concerns as well. We cannot just blindly do AI for everybody because you might have reservations against using public AI. So we want to separate out our NuGet packages and so on. So it is done with some care and responsibility. So that's on the UI front. We have also done some, internal hackathons where we have come up with some very, exciting ideas. What if you could dynamically style your web UI completely based on what the user is wanting? So think about a modern web app, and we could restyle it completely with Sass or CSS based on how you're feeling today.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, it's like a little bit of sentiment analysis in there, or, it could have big implications for accessibility. We could change up fonts and other things to make it easier for, screen readers and so on. So lots of experimentation. We have also trained our own models to do the things that GitHub Copilot will not be able to pull off as much. So we actually have what's called a Blazor REPL. So if you're a Blazor developer doing, .NET developer doing front-end Blazor work, you don't need to install anything. You can just go up to a browser and start writing Blazor code. We give you a little VM. We pull in all your dependencies. But unless you are checking in your code into GitHub repo and opening it up in a GitHub code spaces, there is no code assistance. So we can actually give you some code assistance, and we can also, light up the same type of assistance within your Visual Studio on Windows or VS Code on Mac or Linux as well. So lots to experiment. I'll send you some links. So, poke around and tell us what works, what doesn't, and what excites you. And we'll build on things accordingly. But, my parting words would be, let's, openly embrace AI, because that is, the latest and greatest that our tech industry is excited about. And honestly, the promises are enormous in what AI can do. But let's keep a, eye out on our realities of delivering high quality enterprise software that runs businesses. So use as much or as little of it as it makes sense for your enterprise and your workflows.
Nice. We'll include links to those in the show notes, and listeners, make sure to go check out Progress Software and Telerik for .NET and Kendo for all of the JavaScript UI frameworks, Angular, React, Vue, and also Sam's website. And Sam, I'm really glad that we got you on the show, and you've been doing so much public speaking. So thanks for sharing with us all about AI and the user interface on the Azure and DevOps podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.